Hello, I'm Chuck Martin, and welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. With me today is Mitch Klein, Executive Director of the Z-Wave Alliance. Mitch has been President of the Custom Electronic Design and Installation Association, Director of Business Development at Universal Remote Control, and is Director of Alliance's Strategy at Silicon Labs. Among other things at Z-Wave, Mitch focuses on identifying the smarter home of the future and where IoT is going. Welcome, Mitch.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Chuck.
Can you start by just telling people what the Alliance is, just so we can get that as a platform here, and we'll go from there?
Sure, absolutely. The Alliance is a organization with manufacturers that will develop products for, we'll call it the smart home, but it's actually a broader category of IoT. Z-Wave Alliance focuses on the that technology, which devices communicate with each other and issue commands to be able to turn things on and off, establish functions. And anyway, so it's companies that build the products, it's companies that sell the products, and it's companies that help to develop the actual technology, keep it updated, and work on the source code itself.
And then how does that impact consumers? Do consumers even know?
That's a great question because the answer is probably not. And I think the goal is for consumers not to have to know about it. The way it helps consumers is that manufacturers build products that all interoperate with each other, so that if you want a door lock or you want different lighting products or sensors or other types of devices, they just work with each other. Obviously, that's a huge task, and we still have a long way to go. But within the actual Z-Wave ecosystem, any products that are built with Z-Wave in it will all interoperate with each other. So how the technology works isn't really important to the consumers. If you just see the Z-Wave logo, you know it will work with the stuff that you already have in your home.
You've been living in the world of smart homes and IoT for years now. I wonder if you could walk us through your view of how it's developed over the years.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I've been involved long before smart and home were ever put in the same sentence. As a matter of fact, it used to be called home automation. So how has it evolved? Well, initially it really started with audio and with video and trying to get devices to actually work together. And some of us can remember the days when you had multiple remote controls in your home to control things like your receiver, or you remember CD players, turntables, things like that. And you would actually have to have 3 or 4 different remote controls on your coffee table to be able to get things to operate. And it was really complicated. And from my perspective, that's kind of where the smart home really began, is from the audio and video side. And so we would install systems that would enable things like to turn a projector on, drop a screen, and create a movie theater experience. But you also wanted to turn the lights off. And, gosh, forbid that you had to get up from your seat and turn the lights down. So then we would try to tie lighting into it and literally take breadboards and put triggers into existing dimmers and switches to be able to have the lights now change the scenes when you started your home theater. But then we also had to close the blinds when that happened. So we needed to add additional relays, be able to open and close window shades. And then, of course, it kept going from there. So that's kind of where I saw the beginning of what I would call home automation. We hate that term, so we call it smart home. We hate that term too. So, Chuck, if you have a better term for it, love to hear it. But that's kind of where it all began. And then you had companies like this company out of Denmark, which was called Zensis, and they decided that we're going to use a software solution to enable things to just interoperate and require them to use the entire software the way it was written, so that you now had devices that would actually work together. Zensis was purchased by a company in the US called Sigma Designs, which was purchased by a company called Silicon Labs, and ultimately became Z-Wave. So that's kind of where I saw it all coming.
So at some point, did you see it really accelerate? Like, was there some one year where all of a sudden, like Alexa came in and everyone said, "I better have this kind of thing"? Was there something that triggered it?
I would say along the way, there were a group of companies or installers that were trying to secure products, and I'm getting to the specifics of this in a moment. But and they got together at a Consumer Electronics show in, I think it was 1990, and said, we're small companies, we're trying to get access to some of this great equipment, and we need to band together to show that there's really a marketplace for it. And that really became the start of the CEDIA organization, which was the Custom Electronic Design and Installation Association. And I think that's when smart and home really started to gain some momentum. There were other organizations that kind of started up around that time, but CEDIA obviously has outlasted all of them.
So are there associations like yours behind the scenes, kind of getting all this plumbing to work together, and people aren't aware, but it's still going on?
Yeah, actually, there's a common cartoon about that too. So yeah, there's probably a good 10 or 12 different types of technologies and organizations that tried to make this all happen. And they kind of worked independently of each other. So really, you never really had everything kind of organized, working together the way it should. And that's kind of what brought us into today. I think I missed the question that you asked, but that's when this organization called the Zigbee Alliance tried to get together with organizations like Apple and Apple, Samsung, Google, all the big companies, of course, Amazon. And we saw the smart speaker come out, and it started to get people excited about the kinds of things you could do, with these voice controls. So yeah, I would say that's when it started to hit the more mass market, at least the awareness of it all. But you still had a really fragmented marketplace whereby products didn't work together. So you could have your Amazon products, but they didn't work with the Apple products, which didn't work with the Z-Wave products, and so on and so forth. So you still required the consumers to understand the technology and which ones work with which ones. So getting to that target hockey stick growth of mass market adoption still remains the holy grail. And a
So
lot of smart,
is it better today, and where does it go?
it's on its way to better today. Where does it go? It really goes to the point where products just need to be able to work together without consumers having to do a significant amount of research. That's where this organization that grew to be called the CSA, or the Connected Alliance. And this is where we had about 250 or so companies getting together and saying, let's all figure out how it is we can create a platform that all devices, regardless of brand, will just simply work together. And they came up with what is now known as Matter. It's the beginning of the solution, okay? It's not quite finished yet. It's the beginning of a solution that would work with all of whether it's an Apple product or an Amazon product, and will also work with existing devices that Z-Wave and Zigbee have already been installed in God, millions of homes. So we've got a ways to go. We're getting.
When you think about it, it took forever to get plug and play with Microsoft to work, but now everyone
Right.
sort of expects it. So I guess the question is the speed of adoption.
Yeah.
Once that happens, where everything really is essentially plug and play, does the market explode? I mean, it's already exploded, but even more.
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't say that the market has exploded just yet. And yes, the answer is absolutely. You know, there's easy products for consumers to install, and then there's things like lighting devices, dimmers and switches and thermostats, which, some of the more initiated can actually install. It's not really a complex challenge, but nevertheless, it still requires some level of understanding of how things work. Yes, I think we're getting really close to that point of adoption. We're not there yet.
So your group just did a major study in multiple countries. Can you give me some of the highlights of that?
Yeah, so we're coming back around to Z-Wave. So I'm sorry, I kind of, pivoted off of Z-Wave and started talking on some other things. But
No, this is all this. It's all the same thing.
yeah, Z-Wave Alliance, just so we can kind of set the stage a bit. Z-Wave has been a very, very successful platform, and just about 90, maybe 90 to 95% of the professional and even some of the consumer installed security systems are based on Z-Wave. Consumers probably don't know that, but that's a matter of fact. So there's a huge network of installed Z-Wave security systems, which would include thermostats, door locks, lighting, sensors, et cetera.
And the study looked at that or different things?
Yes. Yes. So with that in mind, the Z-Wave Alliance, which is the group of members that manufacture and distribute these products, commissioned a survey, and now this is the fourth one that just came out this year. But up until this year, the survey was within the United States market, which is always the biggest market, to determine, okay, what is the adoption rate? How many people are aware of what Z-Wave is? What are the most popular products? How many people are looking to expand and add more devices to their systems?
So what did you find?
And well, obviously we found that it's growing, but it still hadn't quite hit the the level of adoption. So the opportunity for growth still existed. And I'll get into some of the details, but in 2022, we added in some European countries. So we said, let's not just only focus on North America. Let's take a look at what's going on. And we chose to add in Germany, France, and the UK because they were, according to our members, certainly the biggest.
And was the result, were all the companies basically the same in terms of where they are in adoption rate?
That was the interesting thing, is if you look at it holistically, yeah, they're all pretty much growing, and there are definitely some significant commonalities between them, but there are some cultural differences. For example, security is a number one concern in the United States, but in some of the European countries, the way that they have multi-dwelling units, and it's much more common to have those, in cities than we have in the U.S. Security wasn't quite as important as, say, energy savings, which became a priority.
What about speed of adoption? Is it pretty much the same everywhere or different?
We're seeing that it's pretty much the same, that there's still intention to add smart devices into their homes. But again, in Europe, there seems to be much more interest in energy, monitoring energy, saving dollars on energy, whereas in the US, not quite as much. But as we start looking at what types of devices are getting adopted, all of a sudden the commonality starts, creeping in. Where
And what about the situation of do it yourself versus installers? That's been kind of around forever. Is that still the same, where some people will do it themselves and others, they don't want to touch it?
Absolutely. I know within the CDA, the professional installation market, there's been this concern about do-it-yourself, products, but essentially these do-it-yourself products help to grow the overall industry and the awareness. So yes, we're definitely seeing more do-it-yourself. Definitely that percentage is going up. And I kind of look at that as comparing it to, say, like one of the, say, a Home Depot or a Lowe's, where you could build an addition. You could go into one of those stores and have access to all of the products and the guidance you need to be able to build it yourself. But the reality is people don't. Why? Because it's just a time constraints. How much do you actually want to learn to do on your own? So you get smaller projects that get addressed, right? And it's kind of the same way with the adoption of the smart home, is we're seeing that the do-it-yourself is starting to gain momentum for things like, okay, I want to install a door lock. There's some really good, reasons for doing a door lock, or, smart light bulbs, which has really started to get a lot of attention into how smart lighting works, which is one of the fastest growing categories. Those are easy do-it-yourself, and yes, we're definitely seeing that adoption that adoption rate growing quickly over the past 4 years of our surveys.
So you deal with IoT in general. Where do you see the smart home fitting in the grand scheme of things? Because we obviously have connected vehicles, we've got smart factories, we've got smart buildings, we've got a lot of connected people, basically. Where does the home fit in that ecosystem?
Interesting that, when I first really got into automation and smart devices, things like that, these commercial markets and pro markets always seem to be driving the technology adoption. And that has now flipped 180 degrees. That really, it is kind of the smart home that's beginning to drive the technology adoption everywhere else. I'll use automobiles as an exception at this point, but when we start looking at factory automation, we look about smart cities and automated meter reading, things like that. The uptake has actually been a little bit slower than it has been in the smart home. And some of the technologies that are driving smart home products and adoption are finally finding their way into some of these professional markets.
Is it the actual technology, or is it the consumer expectation that's changing, where all of a sudden they get something that's really good in the smart home, and then they go to work and say, why don't I have this capability? Or is it the actual technology?
It's actually both. Uh, if I go back to my installation days, you would install a system in someone's home that was just a fabulous, experience, and then they'd get into their office and things didn't work that way. So that kind of drove, well, I want to do this in my office. Um, but actually, when we start looking at things like automated metering, for example, which is hundreds of millions of meters out there for electric, gas, and so on and so forth. That's about cost savings for the utilities, significant cost savings for the utilities, and so it's kind of both. So the technology is definitely driving adoption as well as the experiences.
So going into the future, do you see an evolution to the smart home as a service? Because everything's as a service these days, obviously SaaS. Or do you think it's going to stay the do-it-yourself versus installers, or is there some other model that's coming?
Everything's as a service. We already know that, Chuck. Interestingly enough, one company was actually at the Consumer Electronics Show last year and started this thing called water as a service. So I think everything is as a service. And it's just a question of how much service the consumers are willing to pay for and adopt.
So what would that look like for a smart home?
Uh, it would be, and actually there are models for that right now. So you're paying for a service that's going to monitor your security, and then they're going to monitor also for, say, water and fire. They can also monitor for energy consumption. So I mean, that model already exists; it's already out there. So that's just
So basically just adding things to it, essentially.
Precisely right, exactly. And another area where we'll start seeing really growth, and I'm not a big fan of the term, but everyone understands what it is, and that would be like aging in place. There's no secret that population is aging. I mean, I'm sitting here aging in place as we speak. And people want, as we age, people want to stay in their homes longer. And as you know, as folks grow older, it's really the family members that bear the burden of really taking care. And, there are some real impacts on everyone's life. And so technology is definitely being applied in many ways to help people stay home through various types of monitoring, whether it be health related, physical environment related, so on and so forth. So I think that's going to be a really important aspect, and we're going to see that growth.
So you live in the world of IoT. What surprises you, if anything? Are you ever surprised anymore?
Uh, I would be. No, actually, I'm not, because I'm kind of a bit of a dreamer too. I guess if any surprise would be the fact that things that I dreamed about are actually happening now.
So a year from now, we're sitting here having this conversation. What will we be talking about? The same thing or something different?
Well, I'm going to expect that a year from now, we're going to see a sharp rise in adoption. I think that the last couple of years where everyone spent all this time at home and really began to understand how technology can help people cope with or improve their lives at home, we're going to start seeing the results of that a year from now. We're going to start seeing a lot better growth, a lot more adoption, and a lot more products that work easily, simply with each other.
Well, I look forward to that conversation. Thank you so much, Mitch, and thank you all for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things. This is Chuck Martin.